This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. This week, our podcast is brought to you by ASIC's Money Smart. Its Just Ask campaign provides help for all Aussies experiencing financial hardship. Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
This week, Claire, it's Trump's guilty verdict at the top.
Hard to get past that as the top news story this week. We're going to talk through as well what's happening in Rafah and the response to it from around the world. Direction 99, not One Direction, the boy band.
No, not
something else entirely.
Yep.
Also that landslide in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy, but there's some light too. Iceland's presidential election has some quirky bits to it, and it's Origin Week coming up, both men and women's, for all the rugby league fans out there. Plus, we say thank you, Claire, a really big thank you.
Very big thank you.
The most clicked link out of the Squiz Today newsletter this week is the best one we've ever had, in our opinion.
I don't think we could be more pleased.
We're very
pleased. This is the most clicked link. Really couldn't be more pleased. It is the Squiz Today newsletter, our survey.
Our audience survey. More than 5,000 of you filled this out. It's incredible. We're doing a podcast, so we should talk about our podcast listeners' contribution. Just shy of 2,000 of you filled out the survey. Pretty much unheard of. It's 59 questions long.
So
it's not short.
It's not a little contribution.
No, it's not like 3 questions.
Yeah, and the completion rate was extraordinary. So when we threw it at people and thought, it's a big one. Like, we know it's a really big one. Just do your best and see how you go. When we were talking about putting targets on it, particularly for podcasts, because getting people to do podcast surveys is really hard. There's not like a button in front of you that you can press like you can in a newsletter. You have to go and find the link and do the thing. We were hoping for 1,000. That would have been a major achievement. To get just shy of 2,000 is extraordinary.
Yeah, the purpose was to get your take on the things that we do, how you're feeling about the world, how you're feeling about the media landscape here in Australia and everywhere, really. As I said, 59 questions deep, and really just a huge thank you to anyone who did this.
The survey's still open.
The survey's still open, of course.
Want to do it?
Yeah.
Please dive in. We certainly appreciate every single contribution.
Please do that. And also we will let you know, we'll come back to you on what you told us and what we found, and make sure that we complete that loop, because it's important you know sort of the general sentiment of the Squiz audience. To the news, Claire, as we were prepping for Weekly Wrap, a breaking news alert popped up on both our phones, of course, and many people's phones, saying that Donald Trump has been found guilty of all 34 criminal charges in his hush money trial. So this story jumps to the top today. A current or former president has never been convicted of a crime before.
He's also the first presumptive major party candidate to be a convicted felon as well. So lots of historic firsts for this. Let's start at the top just to get a recce again on what this is all about. This was one of 4 cases that have been brought against Donald Trump in the last bit of time. Alex Ty and I actually did a shortcut on this. We put all those 4 cases together. So if you want a quick recce on that, it's a really good listen, and we'll put that link in the show notes. Just to give the top line, there's 2 federal cases. So the one about his possession of classified documents and the one about the riots on the Capitol in 2021. There's also a case brought by the state of Georgia on election interference, and this case which was brought by the state of New York.
This is the first case to be tried. It was about dodging up business records to cover up a sex scandal that threatened to sort of derail his 2016 presidential campaign. The crime was the cover-up, not the sex with adult film star Stormy Daniels.
Exactly.
Trump denies that ever happened anyway. The crime also wasn't about the payment of any hush money.
Yeah, so on the payment of hush money, though, Michael Cohen, who was Trump's lawyer, his fixer, he pleaded guilty to federal charges of campaign finance laws that resulted from those hush money payments. He went to jail for that. He's the guy who paid his own money to pay Daniels off, and he was reimbursed by Trump, who then went on to falsify documents to cover it up, what that money was for.
It's a bit confusing.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
It's a chain.
Why are
and a
they
chain
calling
and a chain.
it the hush money trial?
Because that's the sexy line. It goes straight to the payment.
Yes, rather than what he's actually being tried
falsifying
for.
business documents case doesn't quite have the same cut through, I don't think.
But that's what it is. Michael Cohen was a key witness against Trump in this trial. As for the consequences of this guilty verdict, because I think that's what everyone wants to know.
Yeah, what does it mean?
What does it mean? Is he going to jail? Is he not going to jail? Is he going to run for president? Is he not running for president? He's going to be sentenced on the 11th of July. As you said before, he's the first presumptive major candidate nominee to be convicted of a crime. Presumptive because he's not yet been endorsed as the candidate for the Republican Party. That will happen at the Republican National Convention, which starts on the 15th of July. So 4 days before that will be his sentencing.
It's really interesting timing, isn't it? And conventional wisdom would be, okay, so wow, how do we have a convicted criminal as our candidate? But there's absolutely no indication that the Republicans are changing course.
His supporters are certainly that. What if he's jailed though?
On the
Could
11th of July?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of experts are weighing in on this, and no doubt they will over the coming weeks in increasing volumes. The charges that he's been found guilty of are in the least serious category. They're still punishable by up to 4 years in jail, but the general tone of the conversation so far is that Trump's unlikely to be sentenced to prison. He's a first-time offender. It's a non-violent white-collar crime.
There's also the legal wrangling to come. This isn't over. Trump will appeal the decision. That's another factor to consider. Another thing being discussed is how this might affect the election. So if he is endorsed, if he's not jailed, if he does run for president on the 5th of November, the Republicans have some data on what that might mean.
And quite a bit of data because they've been running these primary elections to pick the candidates. And what they did was a lot of exit polls. And in a lot of those exit polls, they asked the question, would it be an issue for you if Trump is convicted of a crime, if he's a convicted felon? More than 10% said that would be a problem, that they wouldn't vote for him if that was the case. Also, a few weeks ago, there was an Ipsos and ABC News poll, not our ABC, the American broadcaster. They found that 16% of those backing Trump right now would reconsider their support for him if he was found guilty of a crime.
And this is important because it's really, apparently, according to all the experts, a really tight race with the Democrats. And of course, President Joe Biden will be the person running against Donald Trump. So every vote counts. We also know there's a complicated relationship between Trump and US voters. He has his hardcore supporters. He's already spoken to them. He's already said to them.
Moments after that verdict was handed down, on his Truth social account, he posted a fundraising request. He went straight to the money. He said, I am a political prisoner. If you can afford to help me fight back at this pivotal moment, please donate.
It's also highlighted the point Trump made to the media that the trial was, this is his words, a rigged political witch hunt trial. He also said, I did nothing wrong. I'm reading these from his Truth account. There's a lot of capitalizing. There's a lot of, things that aren't proper nouns being proper noun.
Lots of exclamation marks.
Lots of exclamation marks. It doesn't quite come across in a podcast in the same way that it does when you read it. As for the Biden campaign, straight after the verdict, it put out a written statement saying, in New York today, we saw that no one is above the law.
Yeah, that's a real key theme for them. And they also stoked this argument that this alone won't be the end of Trump's political career. They really want people to focus on that and start rallying around this decision point about whether supporting a convicted criminal is the way to go. What they said is today's verdict does nothing to change the fact that the American people face a simple reality. There is still only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, and that's at the ballot box. Convicted felon or not, Trump will be the Republican nominee for president.
Claire, I know how you're spending your weekend.
I've got a feeling you might be spending some of your weekend
reading a lot
too.
about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find this one hard, but I'm just going to rely on you to tell me everything that I need to know. But there will be lots of commentary, lots of front pages, and plenty to get across when it comes to this one. All right, other news, Claire, that Israeli airstrike on a camp for displaced Palestinians in the southern Gaza city of Rafah on Sunday night was the biggest story until Trump
moments
happened.
ago.
Yeah, Israel's Defense Force said it was targeting senior Hamas terrorists, but at least 45 people were killed in the explosion and resulting fire, including children. You weren't on the weekly wrap a few weeks ago. Larissa and I went through the logistics of the Israeli ground operation that started in Rafah just a couple of weeks ago.
You did, but even if I have heard that once, I think it just takes a little bit to clock, so let's recap.
Rafah is Gaza's southern point. After October 7, Israel started targeting Hamas in the north and told locals to head south. Since then, it's moved its focus to the south, to Rafah. That's the last Hamas stronghold. That's where more than 1.5 million Gazans went when Israel targeted the north.
And worth just a bit of a reminder about how that has played out. So before October, Rafah had a population of about 250,000 people. I find it quite hard to imagine. Basically, the whole population of Gaza went to Rafah. They say about 80% of the population ended up in that city. And Gaza as a total is just a 360 kilometre square strip of land. It's basically the size of a regional Australian city.
Such a small place with so many people, and it's the scene of a war. Where we're at now is that since that ground offensive started a few weeks back and Israel wanted civilians to leave, so they asked civilians to leave. Many have, but there are still hundreds of thousands of people in that city and that area. As for what went wrong on Sunday, there are differing versions of events. It's more about the way the Israeli military is going about things that's at the centre of this discussion.
Yeah, it really is. And what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said is that the IDF did all of its checks. It checked all the intelligence. It had a close look at it to ensure that civilians wouldn't be harmed. And he said, and this is the quote, that he regrets any harm to uninvolved civilians during combat. He also called the deaths a tragedy. He did say, though, that the IDF was trying to eliminate some senior Hamas leaders and that it was successful in doing that.
So the question that's usually thrown up in this is, what did US President Joe Biden say? What is the US saying? America is Israel's biggest ally. When Israel turned its attention to Hamas in Rafah, Biden warned that he would block the transfer of certain weapons if Israel targeted heavily populated areas in Rafah. What they said this week, though, is in its assessment, the White House's assessment, Israel hasn't launched a major offensive on Rafah. And what happened on Sunday, while tragic, didn't change its position of support for Israel.
And looking at the commentary off the back of that, many saying that America's response to this incident is the strongest indicator yet that Israel is conducting a military operation that the White House can accept.
It's not the case for other stakeholders in this, and loud stakeholders. A week ago, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to immediately halt its offensive in Rafah. It said it endangered the civilian population there. It didn't call, though, for a complete ceasefire.
Yeah, and regardless of what anyone says, Israel responded that it has no intention of halting its military operation. It's absolutely clear about that. Of course, that court order isn't enforceable anyway.
Yeah, here in Australia, Penny Wong, our foreign minister, reiterated Australia wants a ceasefire. To the wider discussion about the war, this week there's been a documentary put out on Sky News hosted by former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, who is Jewish, about anti-Semitism in Australia. You and I both watched it. It was a big conversation that was happening within news people this week. It's one perspective and a good reminder in all of this to read widely, watch widely, consume lots of different sources. It's a really big topic and especially front of mind for many this week, as it's likely that you either shared an AI image that reads "All Eyes on Rafah" or you saw it.
This image, it's a whole talking point of the week. It urges the world to pay attention to all the things that we've just talked about, what's happening in Rafah. It depicts tents in a camp that are arranged to spell out the phrase "All Eyes on Rafah" against a desert backdrop. It's an AI-generated picture. More than 40 million shared that on Instagram in the first 24 hours of it appearing.
It's raised some interesting questions, some saying it's clearly anti-Israel. On the other side, some pro-Palestinian campaigners are annoyed by the image because they say we should be able to see the real pictures of what's going on there.
Lots of issues with that, of course, because there's very few journalists who can provide those sorts of images. And the social media platforms are also not showing anything that's too graphic.
You mean companies like Meta? They're preventing that sort of content from being widely seen in case they're then accused of inciting division and hate. We know that's been a big issue. As I said, read widely from trusted sources because there's no end in sight with this one, Claire. Israel's national security advisor this week said that fighting would last at least through the rest of 2024.
A couple of other stories to note from this week. Direction 99.
I feel like this one like just as a casual observer of the news this week has been done to death, but I still find it hard to sort of access and wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about it in the simplest way that I've been able to come at it. There used to be a rule in Australia that if you weren't a citizen and you committed a crime, you were sent home broadly.
Yeah, even if you're on a visa.
Yes.
You had your visa cancelled, or if you were a convicted criminal and you applied for a visa, it would be denied.
That's right. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern had an issue with that because she said it meant people who had lived most of their life in Australia and had strong connections were displaced when they were sent to New Zealand. The Labor Party in opposition agreed and committed to changing things if they were elected.
And of course, they were elected and they put in place what's called Direction 99. It's been interesting to see Labor ministers now trying to say there isn't that direct correlation.
Yes.
But of course, the big argument and the big narrative is that it absolutely is. Essentially, that direction meant that the AAT, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, which is the place that people can go if they get a decision from a government department that they want reviewed, that they want a decision and potentially have it overturned. Basically, criminals could appeal their deportation orders to the AAT, and because of Direction 99, the AAT has to consider their connection to Australia in deciding if they would be sent back to the country that they came from.
This is for all nationalities too, not just New Zealanders.
Exactly.
So this is for everyone. So what's happened is serious criminals have been allowed to stay in Australia. It's raised a lot of questions about how well this government is managing who can live here, especially as they've also had the issue of the High Court ruling that means 150-odd detainees were released back into the public, many who have since committed crimes in community.
And issue upon issue, when it comes to immigration, lots of pressure on Andrew Giles, who's the immigration minister. He's the person in charge of all of this, and lots of questions about how effective he's been in his role.
Yeah, that one is certainly ongoing. Final story in this segment, Claire. Last week, you and I were in the office and saw an alert come up saying there'd been a landslide in Papua New Guinea. It seemed bad, but not as bad as it turned out to be. In a world where we get news so immediately, it's such a step change the way this one's played out.
Yeah, that's so true. And that part of the world is just so remote.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult to get much information about the scale of that event. Papua New Guinea is a place where landslides happen quite frequently. Difficult, of course, though, when you're looking at the scale of these things. How do you get people there to help? How do you get machinery there to help? So it took quite a while to actually understand the scale of it.
It's still kind of hard to understand. Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister James Marape has blamed extraordinary rainfall on the event. As I said, still difficult to determine exactly the impact. Varying numbers of those who have been killed, some saying hundreds. Papua New Guinea's disaster agency says it's more likely to be 2,000 people, with up to 70,000 people living in the area affected by the disaster.
Yeah, they're just huge numbers.
Before we get into what's coming up next week, a message from our podcast partner, ASIC's Money Smart. Its new Just Ask campaign highlights how Aussies can request help when they're struggling with making debt repayments on things like home loans, credit cards, or personal loans. Many of us find the path to seeking help daunting, confusing, and challenging. But Money Smart is a trusted, independent source of financial information that you can rely on to learn more about requesting support. Visit moneysmart.gov.au/just ask to find out more. Coming up this week in news, Parliament is sitting, Claire, both houses, so expect news out of Canberra. You'll actually be in Canberra this week for a very special speech.
Yeah, I haven't been to the National Press Club for a while to attend one of these addresses, but I'm going to that on Wednesday. Michael Miller, who is the Chief Executive of News Corp, is giving a speech about all the things that are happening in the media landscape at the moment, very specifically around social media platforms, big tech platforms, and how they are hindering or helping journalists tell their stories.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. I'm a bit jealous that you're going to that. I will be here in Sydney speaking about that topic at a lunch.
Yes.
So it's a big
We're both
focus.
busy, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a big focus for us next week and for the media next week. It'll be another one of those weeks where the media is talking about media a lot, but certainly one that does impact us all, this wider conversation. Outside of that and looking a bit further afield, a lot further afield.
You can't actually get much further afield.
Actually, you can't. We're going to Iceland, everyone. Come along with us. They have their presidential elections. I saw this in the news list and I went, that's interesting. So how does that work? The only reason I want to call this...
Only you.
Well, it's heavy today, right? It's really heavy. And there is some really quirky adjacent stories to the presidential election in Iceland that I think people might want to hear.
So long-time squeezers will know I got a little bit obsessed there for a while with Malaysian politics.
You did.
I kind of feel like this is your Malaysia moment.
Maybe it is. I just want people to have something nice and light to talk about today if they don't want to talk about all the other stuff.
They're definitely going to be talking about the Icelandic presidential election for something nice and light.
It's on today.
Okay.
150 people actually put their name on the ballot for president because they filled in the paper incorrectly. That's my first fun fact.
This is hilarious.
It is really funny. So, like, for example, there was one story of a woman who got a call. She was on a holiday in Europe and she got a call saying, "You're running for president." And she went, "No, I'm not. I was just enrolling to vote." Anyway, then she was put on the ballot. So there was that. And then there was a very serious and very real bid to have a glacier run for president. It's not a joke. This is true. It fits the criteria, a clear criminal record over the age of 35. That's just what you need to be.
Right.
They need 1,500 signatures of support from voters in all of the country's quadrants to be able to run. And I think this is where the glacier fell short.
Because it didn't have that geographic spread.
Well, no, they just didn't get the 1,500. It was a shame.
It's a real shame.
It's really real. Some have expressed hesitancy about how the idea would work in practice. And the response to this was, the team has seized on these concerns to hash out various scenarios, explaining that a bottle of glacial meltwater could be sent when the president is invited to engagements abroad, and that visiting foreign dignitaries could be redirected to meetings with local specialists in fields such as glaciology.
Wow.
Told you it was fun.
All I can say.
Told you it was fun.
Is this the point where we point out that the presidential job in Iceland is largely ceremonial?
That it isn't sort of the head. It isn't like it's
running the government.
The prime
anything.
minister is the person that runs the government, and also there's only 300,000 odd people in Iceland.
Yeah, it's smaller than Canberra.
But now we know a little more about it, Claire.
I'm so pleased for that. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing the work on that.
It was fascinating.
Slightly bigger election, though, is India's. Like it's
slightly
the polar sort of opposite of what we've just talked about. They've been voting for ages. It's a massive election. The results, apparently, Tuesday, Wednesday. We should
start
know
to come in.
Exactly who's won that. Also, people queuing up for things. Cold Chisel tickets go on sale.
On Wednesday, are you going to try and get tickets?
I reckon I might.
I thought you might.
I think I kind of have to. I grew up in the era when Jimmy Barnes was doing his solo thing, was huge. Yeah. And Ian Moss, Tucker's daughter.
Oh,
my dog Tucker is called after Tucker's daughter.
Of course.
Although he's a boy. But anyway, so Cold Chisel, I'm in.
Yeah,
for sure.
Good luck. I actually owe you tickets. Maybe I'll queue up for you. I owe you for Taylor Swift, so maybe I'll queue up for you on your behalf.
I might have done all my ticket buying luck on those.
You are very lucky. They'll be also featured on Australian Story on Monday too. So
good one.
If you miss tickets, that's something to catch. Rugby league, there's a segue there between Cold Chisel and rugby league that I've completely missed. But State of Origin Game 1 is on Wednesday night in Sydney. Thursday night is Game 2 for the women. New South Wales won Game 1, so Queensland has to step up. That's in Newcastle. Still on sport, the French Open is on. Raphael.
Yeah, Nadal is out. I didn't really pay much attention this week. As we get into that pointy end, I'll start paying a bit more attention. But what I did clock is Rafael Nadal out. It's kind of the winding up of his career really too, which is why the shortcut was on that this week.
Yeah, lots of fans of Rafa in our office, and our shortcut was really informative. I had no idea that he was born right-handed but plays left-handed.
If you want to know about these things, Larissa Moore is your person.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah.
And we'll finish the week with the 28th annual Australian Kelpie Muster, Claire.
Yep, that's in Casterton. It's on until the 9th of June, so it's quite a big one.
I feel a gallery coming on.
Oh, great idea. I'm putting that on the list.
Squiz recommends, Claire, anything is an improvement on last week because we didn't actually have a recommendation last week.
We really didn't do our work, but we have this week. Kate, we're going back into some harder stuff.
Yeah, so, I'm going to get serious again. I've spent a lot of time this week reading about the Israel-Gaza war and how terrible it all really is, of course. Then an email landed in my inbox from the BBC with a focus on the Russia-Ukraine war. and a link to an article about how on the Ukrainian side of the border there's been no school for many kids for 2 years and how they're trying to fix that by building schools underground. It's just a reminder of what's going on there.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to put a lot more about Ukraine into our Squiz Today part this week. We managed to get it in for one day. You can see Zelensky getting more and more frantic about getting support, that it's falling off the radar. He wants people to really step up and pay attention. It is still such a sad and tragic story, that one.
Yeah, so that link's in your episode notes. Look, it's actually a heartwarming read. It's about the way they're rallying together to kind of make sure that kids still get an education in a really terrible time. But yeah, it is just a reminder just to put the focus back on that. You've gone light and breezy though.
Yeah, I really have. I've just devoured the third season of Hacks.
I think
I've
you've
gone on
recommended this
about Hacks a
before.
couple of
Yeah.
times. I feel like it's one of those shows that I think you would really like it,
Okay.
Kate. I think a lot of people will like it. I love the dynamic of this talented older woman and this younger go-getter who pushes her, and I think that sort of explains our dynamic.
Did you just say you were older and I was younger publicly?
Oh my God.
Oh, that's a bit of an insider joke for people who've been listening for a long time. So anyone who gets that,
Kate
please,
is much younger than I.
please enjoy that. Squiz Press this week is a call out that there won't be a News Club episode this week. We're working on our interview series, which we're hopeful to bring you in late June.
Newsletter is still going strong though. We've had such a good response to the News Club newsletter. So we'll continue to use that as a place where we'll curate the really great things to listen to, watch, whatever it is, and get across an issue that's really of the news of the moment.
Yeah, if you aren't signed up, it's a note from either Claire or myself on a topic we've gone deep on and the things that we read about it to get a variety of perspectives and therefore a deeper understanding of the news. So it's a bit of behind the curtain of how we come to the news. And we also have a poll each week in that newsletter of which lots of people take part. It's a great way to keep you at the heart of our news conversations. So if you aren't signed up, as I said, please do so using the link in your episode notes. This week, the newsletter will be from you, Claire, and it's about what's going on with AI.
Yeah, sadly, if anyone was hoping it would be a curation of links on the Icelandic presidential election, that isn't happened. Lots going on with AI at the moment, and yeah, some really good reads and things to watch that I've come across. So I'll put that to you on Monday.
Monday in your inbox. Thanks for listening to this episode of Weekly Wrap. We'll be back next week.